I recently posted a video on the 5 steps that I personally followed to get myself from a $0 net worth all the way to a $100,000 net worth. And those 5 steps are exactly what I would recommend to you if you were starting from zero today. And in the comments, I had a lot of people asking me about budgeting. So in today's video, what I want to do is I want to cover the 5 most common types of budgeting methods, what I believe works for people who are brand new to finances, maybe people who are overspending, people if you make decent money but just can't seem to save anything, maybe if you're living paycheck to paycheck, or if you already have control but you just hate tracking your finances. And once I go through all 5, I'll tell you guys the one that I actually use and my favorite one. Now, first things first, budgeting is not supposed to ruin your life. I think a lot of people hear the word budget and they immediately think that they can never go out, they can never buy anything fun, and they just basically have to live like they're being punished for waiting to get ahead financially. And in my opinion, that's not what budgeting is, and that's never been what it's about. A budget is simply just a plan for your money. That is it. It's not supposed to make you miserable, and it's not supposed to make you feel guilty every single time you spend $8 to $10. Now, if you're in a really bad spot financially, then yeah, maybe your budget might need to be a little bit stricter. Or if you have high interest debt or no savings or you're behind on bills, right? There might have to be a few reasons why you would start budgeting. But for most people, it's not about never spending money. It's just about knowing where your money is going before it disappears out of your account. So I believe that if you're someone out there who says they hate budgeting, I think there's a good chance that you actually don't hate budgeting. You probably just hate the method of budgeting that you tried. Let's go ahead, let's get into the video. Now, for each budgeting method, I'm going to recommend the type of person that I believe will benefit the most from it. However, depending on your financial situation, you can really use any of these budgeting methods I'm going to go over. It's really all about personal preference at the end of the day. However, if you are brand new to budgeting and your finances, I would probably start with the 50-30-20 method. And the reason I like this one for beginners specifically is because it's a very simple budget to follow. The idea is that 50% of your income goes towards needs, 30% goes towards wants, and 20% goes towards saving, investing, and or paying down debt. So for example, needs would be stuff like rent, groceries, transportation, insurance, utilities, and anything you actually have to pay for to live life. Wants would be things like eating out, shopping, subscriptions, entertainment. You guys know what a want is, right? Random stuff you buy because life would be boring if you only paid for bills. And then 20% is the part that actually moves the needle forward with your finances. That's going to be things for saving for an emergency fund, investing for your future, or paying a little bit extra towards debt. Now, I would not treat this like some kind of perfect rule that everyone has to follow exactly, because depending on where you live or how much you make or what your bills look like, your needs might already be more than 50%. Or you might never actually need 30% towards wants, depending on your spending habits. So if your numbers do not fit perfectly, you can definitely adjust the percentages as needed. But this budget is very good to use as a starting point, because the real value of this method is that it shows where your money is going in a very simple way. You can look at your spending and ask, am I spending too much on wants? Or are my needs too high? Or am I actually saving anything? And for most beginners, that right there is enough to actually get started on a good financial freedom path. You don't really ever need a super in-depth system, and something like the 50-30-20 rule gives you something that just helps your money go in the right direction and kind of helps you stop guessing where everything else went. Now, the next budgeting method is probably best if you are in debt or you know you overspend, and it's called zero-based budgeting. This one is a little bit more detailed than the 50-30-20 method, and that's kind of the point. If your money keeps disappearing every month, you probably need a system that is going to force you to pay attention. So the idea of this, once again, is very simple. Every dollar gets assigned a job. So before the month starts, you basically look at how much money you expect to bring in, then you decide where all of it's going. Bills, groceries, gas, debt payment, savings, investing, spending money, whatever it might be. By the end, your income minus everything you plan for should equal $0. Now, that does not mean you spend all of your money. It means that every dollar is assigned somewhere, even if that somewhere is saving or paying debt off. Now, this works well for people in debt because it makes you be very intentional. Instead of just paying the minimums and hoping for things to get better, you can actually decide, okay, this month I'm going to put an extra $200 towards this credit card. It also works very well if you overspend because it gives you limits limits before the spending happens, right? If you give yourself $300 for eating out and halfway through the month you've already spent $250, now you know you need to slow down because you only got $50 left. And yes, this method is by far a lot more annoying than the 50-30-20 method because you have to check your numbers, you have to update things, and you have to be very honest with yourself when you potentially go over budget. But if you consistently find yourself going broke or swiping your credit card or wondering how debt keeps piling up, maybe an annoying budgeting method might be for you for a little bit, because sometimes a simple method just isn't enough, right? You need the budget to be a little bit stricter so you can actually start kind of gaining control of your finances. So if you are in debt or overspending or just feel like your money has no direction, I would definitely give zero-based budgeting a try. Now, the next budget, I would recommend this one if you make a decent amount of money, but like you can't really save any of it. And this is called the pay yourself first method. The idea is that before you spend money on anything else, you should pay yourself first. So when you get paid, a certain amount automatically goes towards savings, investing, or debt before you even have a chance to actually spend that money. Because the problem for a lot of people is they tell themselves, I'll save whatever is left at the end of the month. And then the end of the month comes, and guess what? There's $0 left. And it's not because they had some massive emergency every single month, but because the money was just sitting there in their checking. And guess what? It was waiting to get spent on food or Amazon orders or going out or subscriptions or whatever it might be. So instead of trusting yourself to save later, you save first and then you live off whatever is left. So this might look something like automatically moving $200 into a savings account every paycheck, or putting 10% straight up into your 401k, or sending money to a Roth every single time you get paid, or making a little bit of an extra debt payment before you start spending on your wants. The amount does not have to be, crazy at first. It just has to be kind of this habit you build over time, because if you make decent money and you still can't save, you probably don't need a more complicated budget. You don't need more money. You probably just need to remove the decision of spending money from yourself. Basically, you're going to set it up automatically. You're going to move the money somewhere harder to touch, and then you're going to force yourself to live a lifestyle based off whatever's left. And to be clear, this only works if you're still able to cover your bills and not go into debt. You don't want to transfer $500 into savings and then put groceries on a credit card because you ran out of cash. But if your bills are covered and your issue is just that you spend whatever's left in your account, then this method can work really well for you. The next method on the list, this is best if you're living paycheck to paycheck. So if you're really struggling, right, you're going to want to use this method, and it's called the bare minimum budget. And this is not the fun one, right? This isn't the one where it's like, oh, cool, I get to invest now, right? This is the one where you actually have to figure out what you need to survive, right? So with this budget, you only focus on the essentials first, right? You focus on your housing, your utilities, your groceries, transportation, insurance, minimum debt payments, and anything else you actually need to survive and keep working. That's it. Once those are covered, you look at whatever's left and you decide what the biggest problem is. Maybe you need to save your first $500, right, in an emergency fund. Maybe you need to catch up on something you're behind on. Maybe you need to attack and pay down some high interest debt. Maybe you just need a little small buffer so you're not spending your next paycheck before it even hits. And the point of this budget is to not make you feel restricted, right? It's just to help you stabilize the current situation you're in. Because when you're paycheck to paycheck, even having a little bit of breathing room can change everything. Having $300 or $500 set aside, while it might not sound like a lot, but when you have actually nothing, that could be the difference between a small problem and a full-on emergency. And this is when you also might have to be a little bit honest about yourself with what is truly essential. Because sometimes people say they have no money left, and then you go look at their spending and it's food delivery and subscriptions and random shopping and going out and super high car payments or whatever it might be. And I'm not saying that to judge, because everyone, spends money in their own ways. But when you're trying to get out of that cycle, you have to be a little bit more strict on yourself. And the last method on this list is called the lazy budget. This is if you already have decent control of your money, but hate tracking every little thing. And the idea of this is very simple. You automate all the important stuff, and then whatever is left in your account, you're allowed to live off of this. And this method really only works if you currently have control of your finances. If you are saving, investing, paying your bills, and staying out of debt, right, you don't need to track every single dollar forever. And at that point, the goal is just to make sure the big things are handled up front. But if you're broke every month and you're putting stuff on credit cards, right, at that point, maybe this lazy budget really isn't for you, because you want to have a lot more visibility on your finances. So I would only use this once you have some financial discipline built. Now, for example, you might automatically send money to your savings, your investments, your 401k, your Roth IRA, keep all your bills on auto pay, and then give yourself a set amount of spending every single month that you know is not going to bring you to zero. Now, you do not need to know you spent, $14.87 on fast food last Tuesday if your bigger goals are already funded. And that's kind of the whole point. The lazy budget is not about necessarily ignoring your money. It's just about simplifying the process once you already have control. So if you hate tracking, right, but you're still saving, investing, paying your bills, and making progress, this is probably the easiest, most foolproof one to stick with. Now, out of all of these methods, my favorite one is actually the pay yourself first method. This is actually the one that I used when I was really starting to get in control of my finances. And what I liked about this one the most is that I knew when I paid myself first and I took care of all the big things up front, at that point, all my stress was covered. I knew at the beginning of the month, every single time I got paid, if my rent was covered, if my bills were covered, if my groceries were covered, and all of the major important things were covered and everything left in my account was just for spending, I knew I had a lot less to actually stress about. And then as I got better with my finances, slowly but surely, I pivoted into the lazy budget method where now everything's fully automated. All my investments, my savings, all my bills, everything's on auto pay or auto invest or auto save. And all I do is I know the money currently sitting in my account. I could spend it if I want to, or I could use it to knock down extra debt or whatever it might be. So for me personally, I always have a sweet spot for, paying yourself first and then switching over to the lazy method once you actually get in control of your finances. But once again, depending on your situation, how you like to manage money, every single one of these budgets is a great way to actually get yourself on track financially. So those are a few different ways you can budget depending on where you're at. Once again, if you're brand new, maybe start with the 50-30-20 just to get a basic idea of where your money's going. If you're in debt and you know you overspend, maybe zero-based budgeting is probably better for you because every dollar gets a job. If you make decent money, but you somehow never save it, paying yourself might be the move. If you're paycheck to paycheck, definitely use the bare minimum budget. Get focused on getting stable first. And if you already have control but just hate tracking money, lazy budget, set it up, it'll do its thing for you. Now, the biggest thing, once again, it's not finding the perfect budget. You can take all of these, use them as a foundation, and customize them as needed, whether it's percentages or whatever it might be, right? A budget does not need to be complicated to work. If anything, the simpler the budget is, the better it's actually going to work, because then you're not going to hold yourself to something too strict or something that you don't want to follow. So overall, don't overthink it. Pick the budgeting method that you think fits your life right now and try it for a month. See what worked, adjust if you need to, maybe pivot to a different one if you didn't like it, and keep going from there. Because at the end of the day, growing our finances is a constant thing we're always going to have to work on. No matter how good you get with your finances, you always got to make little changes and tweaks here and there. So other than that, I appreciate you guys for watching this video. Let me know in the comments down below what budget you actually follow and what method has worked best for you. Other than that, I appreciate a subscription and a thumbs up, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya.